product provided by Koei Tecmo Europe. Nioh 3 is one of my most anticipated games for 2026. I adored the prior two entries, and getting to play this one ahead of release was just an amazing experience. Of course, I wasn't able to access the online features, all of which returned from prior entries, so I can't comment on those. But here's what I can comment on after about 40 hours of play. Nioh 3's structure has changed from the previous two. Those two were focused on linear levels that would wrap back around on themselves with shortcuts that made getting back around the stage simpler. Nioh 3 is open world. Structurally, it reminds me of Team Ninja's own Rise of the Ronin from a few years ago, which is fitting given one of the settings. Even outside of the handful of traditional Nioh levels, there are plenty of areas, usually around castles and the tips of the map, where they did build similar layouts, complete with shortcuts and a boss to close out. They just turned what used to be optional stages set in the same maps into side quests set in the open world. But unlike Ronin, this game doesn't make those sections into a dedicated stage you load into from the open world. You can freely fast travel out of there if you're struggling. Got a boss giving you grief? Just head to another part of the map and clear things out to get some XP, then come back later. You can even fast travel with allied phantoms, so if you find a useful one, you can bring them to basically any encounter, save the masters who only duel you 1v1. And yes, we do still have historical figures as allied and enemy phantoms in certain areas, especially those focused on major battles. Some of these sections really brought back memories of Nioh 1's DLC, when you were working your way through the sieges of Osaka and there was fighting on all sides and artillery and all sorts of stuff. For me, the biggest flaw in this new approach is that you miss out on cool moments like the moment of realization at Honnoji in Nioh 2, when you realise you're out of the new area and into the original map from the first game. It's cool to have events from Nioh 2 be referenced, but the area where it took place doesn't really look the same here. It's great when fans can be rewarded with callbacks like that to their own history with the series. But speaking of history, the game begins in the Edo period, a few years after the prior two games, starring Tokugawa Ieyasu's grandchild, Tokugawa Takechiyo, who is a custom character like Nioh 2's Hide. Takechiyo does speak on a few occasions, but only to advance the plot, not to have an actual personality like William from the first. Customization is largely the same as Nioh 2, but with some new elements brought over from Ronin, making probably the best any of KT Studios have made thus far. After an opening stage to establish the narrative, Takechiyo is sent back in time to learn about the Crucible, a yokai-infested hellscape that appears over major locations at certain points in history, and appears to be tied to the tragedy that the story begins on. The game proper takes place across several different time periods, though only 3 to my knowledge received the full open map treatment. The Sengoku era centered on the conflict between the Tokugawa and Takeda towards the end of Shingen's life, the late Heian period in the aftermath of Nioh 2's Tengu's Disciple DLC, and the Boshin War for a different take than Rise of the Ronin had. For those who know their Japanese history, they'll recognise that the game is delving into the beginning of Ieyasu's rise to becoming shogun, as seen in the first game, the dawn of the Tokugawa clan, and its eventual downfall, which is a really interesting premise for a story starring the clan's third shogun. The problem is, again, Takechiyo speaks about as much as the Saints Row 1 protagonist, so they don't have much of a reaction to meeting family or friends who have died. Nothing to say when meeting Ieyasu or Tadakatsu or Hanzo. Instead, we have Nekomata chime in to say, hey, you remember when you'd pestered Tadakatsu to let you ride on his shoulders as a child? Having an actual character with their own clear goals and personality and thoughts on situations was something that I always liked about Nioh 1 as a way to set it apart from its From Software developed inspirations. But Nioh 2 and 3 and Wolong Fallen Dynasty just offer an avatar who goes on an emotional journey that fails to land because they just grunt and gasp and nothing else. I hoped Rise of the Ronin having a bit more dialogue, making for a character who is quiet but will still speak their mind when needed, would have carried over here, but unfortunately, by the end of the Heian section, the character has spoken all of 3 times, and I think 2 of those were just to say their name. Fortunately, the environmental storytelling is as strong as ever, even with the larger environments. Corpses whose final words we can hear are plentiful, and we have the ability to have them replay when replaying the stage. I forget if Nioh 2 had that, but 1 did not. Side quests are largely given by restless spirits with regrets you can help them deal with. A lot of them deal with families being completely destroyed by yokai. And we have the preset graves for enemy and allied phantoms, some based on real people and events, though I've yet to find one as harrowing as this one from Nioh 2. But even outside of mechanical storytelling, some areas have really grim details like mass graves. So the series' staple apocalyptic, borderline horror atmosphere remains intact, as does its core gameplay loop, albeit with some massive changes. In addition to being able to jump to get around the environment like in Wolong and Ronin, we have 2 styles to switch between, Samurai and Ninja. Each gets different upgrades and has access to different weapons and armor. Samurai has stance switching, while Ninja has stealth bonuses and ninjutsu. Ninjutsu was always a component of past entries, but its use often felt limited by stationary casting and limited uses. This game overhauls the system. Ninjutsu now allows only 3 to be equipped at a time, but they regain uses from normal attacks, making some enemy encounters a lot easier, especially when you have an ally to distract them while you spam fireballs from downrange. As for melee, this is where I imagine some fans will take issue, since we have all the weapons from past games, a couple of new ones, and even a couple from Wolong, but limited to each style. The game does later let you equip 2 weapons per style, but the ninja weapons lack alternate stances, so the claws, for example, only have the one here. I'm curious if they might add variants of such weapons to Samurai via the DLC, since Team Ninja loves to add weapons to these games in the DLC. Guardian Spirits have a much smaller selection this time around, since many of them offer environmental interaction, incentivizing you to return to previous maps to see where these abilities lead you. There are collectibles aplenty, and sometimes you'll even find secret bosses. I definitely recommend searching for those, since it gives you insight into the motivations of one of the major characters. Overall, the game feels like a mix of all prior games of this style. Nioh 2 as its base with the jumping and parrying from Wolong, and the exploration from Ronin, making for what feels like the ultimate culmination of everything Team Ninja has been developing for the last decade. And yes, obviously the visuals have improved over Nioh 2, given that game was a PS4 game and this one is PS5. It's really only worth mentioning to get this video over 8 minutes for those mid-roll ads. I'm curious to see where the DLC will go. Nioh 1's told a 3-part follow-up, Nioh 2 had 3 eras to visit to flesh out the history of the setting, and Wolong centered each of its 3 DLCs on each of the founders of the 3 kingdoms to set up a sequel. Nioh 3 is confirmed to have 2 expansions on the way, suggesting either a pair of open maps that are probably a fair bit smaller than the main ones, or linear areas like the other eras the game already has. I'm personally hoping for either a full-fledged Edo period map in the aftermath of Takechio's inevitable return to their own time, or maybe a return to the mid or early Heian for follow-ups of the other periods Nioh 2's DLC centered on. And of course, I'm looking forward to whatever crossover bosses we get this time, so I can report on those when I revisit the Nioh Ninja Gaiden Dead or Alive timeline later this year. Once again, thank you Koei Tecmo Europe for allowing me to play the game ahead of release, and I can't wait to see what else this game has in store as further content is added. Also, quick tip, if you want to change the look of your weapons and armor, it's the same place where you change your appearance after starting. I don't think the game said this, and I went 2/3 through the game before stumbling upon it. If you liked this video, why not subscribe and support me on Patreon like these fine people here? You get early access to new videos for just $1 a month. If not, then make sure to share it with your enemies so they can suffer along with you. Today's recommended video is someone else's review. I'm just not sure whose as I record this.